With the pipeline agreement between Alberta and Ottawa now official, both governments are now out trying to sell the plan and crucially plot the next steps. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier Danielle Smith signed the major agreement that aims to build a new oil pipeline and transform Canada's energy sector.
At the core of the agreement, of course, is a priority to have a pipeline to Asia. That's going to make Canada stronger, more independent, more resilient, more sustainable.
The ambitious deal gives Alberta special exemptions from federal environmental laws. The province says we're standing in the way of a proposed new oil pipeline to the BC coast. Although it was all smiles with Carney and Smith, not everyone was happy. Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, resigned from cabinet just hours later, citing his strong opposition to the major new energy agreement with Alberta and accusing Mark Carney of dismantling climate plans. Guilbeault was a former Environment Minister under Justin Trudeau and put in place many of the laws that have now been changed or paused in the deal. Julie Dabrusin is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Nice of you to come in this morning, Minister. I appreciate it.
Good to see you this morning.
I'll start obviously with the news that your predecessor in this role and your colleague Stephen Guilbeault left, saying that he strongly opposed the Memorandum of Understanding. Also pointed to the fact that he believed many of the measures he put in place were being rolled back to fight climate change. How comfortable are you with the suspension or cancellation of some of the measures that had been there put in place by Mr. Guilbeault before?
Yeah, look, I have a lot of respect for Stephen. I worked with him for about 6 years as parliamentary secretary, so I've worked directly with him, including on files on the environment.
Yeah.
But I really respectfully disagree with him on his characterization of this Memorandum of Understanding. I don't see it as backsliding, and I don't see it as cancelling programs. And I know that specifically, like when we talk about things like the clean electricity regulations, those regulations remain in place. And I feel very strongly about that, and that's why I feel comfortable coming out and speaking with Canadians, too, about what the agreement says and what it doesn't say.
They remain in place, but they are paused for Alberta. And as you know, there are other provinces who don't like them either. Saskatchewan is one. How concerned are you that you are going to have to allow for carve-outs for other provinces?
So there isn't actually a carve-out when you read the section of the Memorandum of Understanding on the clean electricity regulations. If I can kind of pull a step back, the way the clean electricity regulations work is that they have a long pace before they actually start taking effect. So they come into effect, or start applying, for a better word, in 2035. And that was to give time for the provinces to be able to plan towards when it's going to be actually applying. And in that time, I have the ability with any of the provinces to negotiate with them if they can show me that they can meet the objectives of the regulation with their own regional path. I can negotiate with them an agreement for them to follow that path as long as it reaches the same objectives.
The Pathways Alliance Carbon and Capture Storage Project was a project in and of itself that was being spearheaded by the Alberta government, oil companies, some contributions perhaps from the federal government. Now it is conditional on the pipeline. Why make that choice? Why did they have to be in tandem as opposed to just going ahead with it?
Well, it was a matter of whether they were actually going ahead with it. And I think the idea that we would move ahead, it's only one of our tools, but carbon capture is one of the tools that can help us to reduce emissions. And so I think that having an agreement from industry, from Alberta, that they will move forward with carbon capture is important. And frankly, it makes sense for them economically to do it.
I want to talk about the industrial carbon pricing. So Alberta is, the government is touting Alberta's commitment to this plan now that would get them to $130 a ton. But there's no timeline. When will that happen then?
Yeah, so that's part of what we also have to negotiate. Again, April 1st is going to be a busy day because I also have until April 1st to reach an agreement on that. But when you think about it, $130 credit price for Alberta is more than 6 times really where they're at right now as their credit price. They're trading at about $20 to $25. And I know that sounds in the weeds, but it isn't economic for moving people towards wanting to invest in low carbon technologies at $20, $25. So getting to $130, making that increase is a really big price signal. It's one of my most important tools to reduce emissions is the industrial carbon price.
Right, but the target previously was $170 a ton.
170 is the headline price, and the credit price usually trades lower than the headline price. And there are a lot of things that still have to get negotiated between Alberta and the federal government on how that works. But we have the agreement to do it. And we don't only have that, we also have a commitment to look at what kinds of financial measures can be put in place. Often we talk about carbon contracts for differences, so that we make sure that it stays in place.
Yeah, except would the goal be to be at $130 by the end of the decade? Because it was $170 by the end of the decade, is that?
Yeah, so I have two things that I have to do right now. One for the country as a whole, which is actually like where this Alberta agreement fits. Is that we set out in the budget that I have to work on what the trajectory will be for the industrial carbon price moving forward, all the way to 2050, actually, we said for decades. So there are many pieces that are coming together at the same time. Within that, there's the negotiations with Alberta, but also with all of the provinces, right? Like, all of the provinces have that opportunity. Quebec, for example, has a separate way that they do industrial carbon pricing too. So it's not just Alberta that has a different way of approaching it.
No, but there is a federal backstop. So, I mean, I feel like we're saying Alberta has signed on to some great plan of industrial carbon pricing that was going to happen anyway.
Sure. Look, there is a backstop, and that's always part of the federal tools in the toolbox on industrial carbon pricing. But we're in a better place if we can get provinces to agree and to cooperate on it and to collaborate on how we move forward. So the backstop's still there, but better.
Yeah, but you're sort of letting them out of the backstop in some ways, right? You're saying you only have to go to this point, and you're going to negotiate the timeline of that, rather than enforcing the federal backstop with them, which I think would have got you to what your goals are more aggressively and more effectively.
Interesting, because I don't know if I would have gotten there more effectively. Like,
why not? It was that's your tool to impose on them.
100%, 100%. And I still have that backstop, and the budget set out that we can impose a backstop in a transparent way with any of the provinces. But working with the provinces is more important, and it means that we're not fighting with them. And I think that that's really what people want to see. They want to see that we're working together with all of the provinces to make things happen. I mean, and that's really what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but they also want to know that you're going to meet your climate goals by 2030, and the Climate Institute is not. It doesn't seem to think that you're on track to do that. Yeah. You have a report that I think you need to make public by the end of the year. Will it show that Canada will meet its 2030 targets?
It will show that we have a lot more work to do, but we're still determined to keep working towards it. And we always knew that the targets that we had set for 2030 and 2035 were ambitious targets. I know I've said this a few times, but it's true. We always knew, and it's important to set something, I think, where we have to stretch. Sure. We could have set a low target and said, hey, we met it, and then everybody can sit back. That's not what we do.
So we won't meet those targets, the 2030 goals?
No, we're still working towards them is what I'm saying. I'm saying that we still have work to do, and that's my job.
But the report that we see this year will show that we're, at this stage, not going to meet them.
It's going to say that I have more things I need to do to get there.
So adding a pipeline to the mix, I mean, obviously it's going to take a long time to build a pipeline, but that is going to make that job much harder, I would think. Well,
look, parts of the whole agreement, like when we talk about this pipeline and the memorandum of understanding, it is tied, as you mentioned before, to carbon capture as well. Yeah. But there's a lot more things that we're going to have to do to actually reduce emissions right across our country. And I think that there's some really important pieces, even when we're looking at the major projects and also in the memorandum of understanding.
I'll just end on this. There was no consultation of First Nations for this memorandum of understanding and British Columbia. It seems like a strange way to go about this, to then seek their ideas and opinions after the fact. What do you say to people who are upset that you have, particularly First Nations, have disrespected the process?
Yeah, I'd say, the Prime Minister said quite clearly that for there to be a pipeline, there needs to be agreement from British Columbia and from Indigenous peoples. That remains. That is very much part of the agreement and part of the way that we are approaching it as a federal government.
Minister, thank you for coming in. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
The pathway to a new pipeline is something Alberta has long been asking for. The province previously said there were these so-called 9 bad laws, as the Premier described them, standing in the way. Ottawa has now either altered 7 of them or suspended some of them, including the federal oil and gas emissions cap, which will not go into place. But there is a price for Alberta, who has also agreed to several conditions that must happen for a pipeline to move forward. One doesn't proceed without the other, including the construction of the carbon capture project, Pathways Alliance, the world's largest initiative of its kind. Brian Jean is Alberta's Minister of Energy and Minerals. Nice to see you, Minister. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rosie.
So Premier Smith says that Ottawa has now removed 7 of the 9 bad laws, as she calls them, that she believed were in the way of another bitumen pipeline. Do you have everything at this stage? Do you think that you need to secure a private sector proponent?
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Great news. One of the best historic days in the history of Canada, in my opinion, for the people of Alberta, for the people of British Columbia, and frankly, all Canadians. We do have enough. They have removed most of, the bad laws, 7, in fact, of the bad laws that were stopping any progress on pipelines and getting our natural resources to the coast, or frankly, anywhere. So this is a great news story for everybody involved. This is about cooperative confederation and making sure that Canada works as one country, and this is a clear indication that it does.
And I'll come back to British Columbia because, as you know, that there are challenges there. But just to go back to the proponent, the price tag of the Trans Mountain pipeline, which Canadian taxpayers still own, ballooned from $7 billion to $34 billion. Do you think that in the current environment, private companies are willing to take on this kind of investment and this kind of risk, frankly?
Absolutely, because the 9 bad laws, the 7 in particular that were stopping this kind of development, are now changed or gone. And now they can have confidence of doing that. Remember, the last pipeline owned by the federal government, sure, it ballooned, it went a little bit over the top, there's no question, but it's already given a return on investment for Canadians. It's a significant money generator. It pays for so many different things like schools and hospitals right across the country. So yes, the answer is if it can go forward under the bad laws that were there and cost $34 billion compared to 7, I've heard different numbers, but the truth is that pipeline between Edmonton and the coast, wherever that may be, should be very reasonable to build at this stage with great certainty and understanding and confidence, because the federal government and the provincial government are working together to get it done. And that's absolutely essential in this type of thing.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges then that exist, because obviously British Columbia is one of those hurdles. David Eby has said he is not willing to allow a moratorium or a phasing out of the tanker ban if that's what's needed. He doesn't believe that this is needed at all, and that it puts into jeopardy some of the projects British Columbia has going when it comes to liquefied natural gas. What are you offering? What are you going to say to British Columbia to get them to at least consider this idea?
Well, let's be clear. BC's coast is Canada's coast. That coast belongs to all Canadians, and we have the right under our Constitution to use that coast to transport our goods to the world. So that's the first thing. It's not up to the BC government, so it's easy for them to say no because they can't. It's not so easy for the federal government to say no because they know that we are in an economic pickle right now that is beyond belief, based upon the last Liberal government that was spending a lot of money, and now we have to pay that back. So there's no question that the MOU talks about how we work with BC and how we work with First Nations, and we're going to do that. In fact, I've reached out personally to Minister Dix several times about this file and talked to him over the last 2 years about this file. And I know the Premier talked to the Premier of BC, and we're talking. We've heard nothing but positive things from most of the chiefs, most of the First Nations, and it's exciting because they're excited about this opportunity. Many of them feel like they've been passed by levels of government that are, frankly, from Ottawa and the big cities across Canada, and they want to be part of the success of Canada, and this will give them that.
So let's talk a little bit about First Nations. Obviously, coastal First Nations do not want this to happen. And again, cite the title.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay.
Rosie, with respect, that's not true. Yeah. We know there's a couple of First Nations on the coast that are loud and proud about the situation, and we understand that, and we're going to talk to them, and we're going to give them the assurances that we've given other First Nations. Remember, the First Nations in northern Alberta are tremendously successful and very happy, and frankly, the stewards of the environment. They take care of it. And that's exactly what we hope that the First Nations in BC will do to make sure that not only get the great jobs, but they're the ones in charge of making sure this stuff, doesn't get into the environment, that it doesn't pollute, that they get the value that they need and they want for their communities.
I hear you, I hear you, but when I talk about coastal First Nations, I'm talking about the representatives of the coastal First Nations. That group, official group, say that they do not want this to happen. Your deal, though, also does require some sort of Indigenous ownership. Do you understand that to mean that it has to be Indigenous ownership in British Columbia? Could it be ownership in Alberta? What is your understanding of how that will work?
Well, I'm very hopeful that we use a model from Enbridge and other proponents that have been very successful in that all the First Nations along the route will participate in the equity of this pipeline on a long-term basis, 40, 50 years, whatever it may be, and the benefits, the economic benefits on that will be paid to them as an owner on this pipeline. And that means not only do they get to be the stewards of it, but they get the real benefits of it long-term. And that is truly great news for the people of British Columbia. It really is.
The Pathways Alliance project, that carbon and capture storage project, it is contingent and conditional on the pipeline. The two things have to be done, at the same time or as much as possible. That's clear in the deal. Before, the carbon and capture storage was a project that was, that oil companies, energy companies wanted to happen anyway. Why did a pipeline have to be connected to it in order to get it done, given that it is probably in the best interest of Alberta as well?
Well, I certainly have been a proponent and very positive about the Pathways Alliance project, but I wouldn't say that all companies have been positive about it because remember, they don't get a return on investment out of putting GHGs, greenhouse emissions, into the earth. There's no benefit for them except for what they would receive as a premium for the price of oil because it is an abated product now. We believe that we're going to be able to have the largest abatement project in the world for CCUS, and as a result of that, have one of the lowest emissions heavy oils in the world. And that means that when we displace heavier oils that are not done the same way as ours, Venezuelan, Mexican, and Iran, we're doing better things for the environment, better things for the people of the world, not just the people of Canada. And to me, that's a great news story.
The other thing, and I'll end now, is the industrial carbon price, which, as you know, you've now agreed to. It can go up to $130 a ton. The Conservative leader, the federal leader, Pierre Poilievre, says that price is going to be passed on to consumers, and is not in favor of it getting that high. What do you say to him and others who believe that that this will mean that people in Alberta will be paying higher costs for things?
He's right. It does. Taxes go to people, and people pay the taxes long-term and ultimately every single time. So yes, it does, but it also enables us to tell the world that our oil sands is abated. It's the largest abatement project on the planet, and it's great news for the entire planet. We can show the rest of the world because we are a world leader on CCUS. So although it is going to raise the price, the truth is that the benefits, and many people don't recognize this, but the ultimate fiscal return on investment from this oil bitumen pipeline is far greater than any other natural resource going to the coast, including natural gas, including all these mines that are happening in Canada. None of them even have close to the fiscal return on investment that this does. This will really bring benefits long-term to all across Canada.
Brian, Jean, nice to see you again. Appreciate you making the time today. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire with all of the variables that have yet to be fulfilled. No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support.
If Ottawa and Alberta want to move forward with this proposed pipeline, they will have to collaborate in some way with British Columbia, a condition that is outlined in the memorandum of understanding. But once a proposed project is designated one of national interest, as this one may be, if there is a proponent that comes forward, Ottawa has the ability to sidestep BC's opposition using powers outlined in the government's One Canadian Economy law, formerly known as Bill C-5, allowing it to push the project forward. Adrian Dix is British Columbia's Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. Nice to see you again, Minister.
Good morning, Rosemary.
You met with Minister Hodgson, I understand, last week about this memorandum of understanding. What was he saying to you to try and get you to think about the idea of a pipeline?
Well, with respect to the pipeline proposal, I think the most significant thing ultimately in the Memorandum of Understanding is the apparent commitment, and we'll see what happens, the apparent commitment not to put public money into this venture, because there's no proponent, there's no route, there's no business plan, there's no possibility. You pay for pipelines through tolls, right, by shippers, no possibility at this price that you would get shipping contracts. So in our view, the pipeline continues to be as marginal a project as it ever was. What we're concerned about, obviously, is the amount of time and attention that's taken. I've probably done more interviews on this than the 9 projects that are actually going forward in British Columbia right now that are of significance. So it takes attention away from government.
But to go back to the idea of the proponent, I mean, 7 of the 9 laws that were in place that the Premier of Alberta at least believed were impeding a proponent from emerging have been lifted. The tanker ban perhaps will be. It's not quite clear what will happen. But there is the possibility, I think, of a proponent in a way that there wasn't before. Would you not agree that that is more a reality than it was a week ago?
Well, the Toronto Dominion Bank did a review of these questions recently. 1.1 million barrels per day in potential capacity for almost nothing compared to this pipeline, for a fraction of the cost of this pipeline. So the fundamental economic question hasn't changed. This is a political effort, a $14 million communications plan. That's all that's gone into it so far. You're correct that Ottawa and Alberta negotiated on economic and environmental policies that affect the whole country. And that is a subject of concern for us, that they make decisions about things that affect our economy. And we and other governments weren't at the table. I don't think that's a very good way to do business in our country. And I made that clear to Minister Hodgson. I'll make that clear to everybody. But all of that said, the fundamental question for us is this a successful project? We've got successful projects. We've got a list of them. And the reason they don't get public controversy is because they have proponents, they're approaching final investment decisions, and they're serious projects. But these are the projects we need to drive over the line. And this project, which won't be a project, even in Alberta's opinion, before next May or June, even in their opinion, won't even be a project, an idea, is not one of those.
So just so I understand the position, Minister, given that there is no company out there, that there is no route, to your point, are you not willing to have a conversation about potential economic and financial benefits to this project? Like you just don't think that's even useful right now. Is that fair to say?
Well, it would be nice if they had a project, if the same standard was applied to Alberta as applied to the rest of us, which is to have real projects. The North Coast Transmission Line, I'll just give you an example. We, BC Hydro, the provincial government, have had 300 meetings with First Nations on the North Coast Transmission Line. We're going to have shovels in the ground next summer. That's a real project. LNG Canada 2, it's building on LNG 1, the largest private sector investment in Canadian history. That's a real project. Solissim's LNG approaching, they believe, I think, final investment decision. That's a real project. The Red Chris mine, that's a real project. We've got tens of billions of dollars of such projects. And our a little bit frustration is that that's what we should be focused on now, and not theoretical projects that will get people through political conventions, which is in part what this does, that require MOUs. When you've got political projects, you go with MOUs. When you've got projects, you've got projects.
Right, but and again, I don't have a horse in this race, but if the point is that you cannot get a project going because of federal legislation that has now been suspended, removed, or can be removed, I just don't know how realistic it is for you to not contemplate that this might become a real thing.
Well, first of all, that assumes that the real issue is federal legislation. The real issue is that there is no demand. But from our perspective, we oppose the lifting of the tanker ban on the coast for good economic and environmental reasons. It's the reason it's been in place for decades. The Haisla First Nation, which is building an LNG facility, Cedar LNG, is opposed to this project. It's not because they're opposed to the oil and gas industry. It's because the danger of this project to their community, their way of life, and their economy.
What I noticed, though, that you don't say, Minister, and I'm not sure the Premier says it either, is You're against the tanker ban being lifted. You're concerned about First Nations communities along the coast. You say there's no proposal, but I'm not sure you say no to a pipeline. Is that what you're saying? That you are not in favor of a pipeline?
Well, let's be clear. We're not. But and so it's pretty straightforward. The answer is no, and the reasons are this: there are better alternatives. We just built a pipeline for $34 billion. $18 billion of that is a subsidy from you and me and every taxpayer in the country. It's not yet full. You could significantly enhance its capacity as much as Alberta needs. And they've chosen not to go that route. And that's fair for them.
I'll end on this. What are you willing to do to stop this from becoming something real then, I guess? Because you will be part of conversations now, that those conversations have started. What are you willing to do things to stop the project as opposed to just saying there isn't one?
Conversations have started, yes, because we are always open to conversations. Okay. So the first thing I did when I became Minister of Energy was go to Edmonton to meet on issues of mutual interest, such as the intertie between our provinces. Yep. So there'll always be conversations, but there ain't no project right now. And so let's focus on the real. And in BC, that is building and leading the Canadian economic renaissance with real projects. Yeah, but that means you will continue to talk. The dialogue will continue, even though the project, to your point, isn't real. Well, the dialogue between ourselves and Alberta is real. Yeah. Whenever Mr. Jean wants to talk to me, the Minister of Energy in Alberta, or Mr. Hodgson, or Daniel Smith wants to talk to Premier Eby, that will happen. We'll always talk, because I think that's important, and we have a very significant mutual interest. But I do find this discussion and this MOU, which dramatically affects every province in the country, and is a narrow relationship. And I just say this finally, Rosemary, if Premier Eby and Wab Kinew and Doug Ford met with Prime Minister Carney to talk about something fundamental to Alberta without Alberta present, what do you think the reaction in Alberta would be? Okay, Minister Dix, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time. Thank you.